Hello and welcome. In this short video, we'll be using the PAN-OS Python module for Palo Alto Firewall. And we can use this module to configure objects like addresses, address groups, policies, interfaces, etc. In earlier video, I used Terraform to configure these elements, but personally, I use Python module as I think it's much faster than Terraform. But Terraform still has the edge when it comes to saving the states and rolling back if needed. In this video, I have Python 2.7 installed, but it's recommended to use Python 3.6. And that's only if you want to use modules like modules that complement Python OS like GUI or PyInstaller. We'll start by installing the PAN-OS module in Python, and then we will write a small Python code with importing the required classes and testing it on our lab firewall. So let's start. So I'm in my Windows, and I'm in the directory where I have the Python installed. I'll check the version first, and the command for that is Python version. And you can see that I have 2.7.18. As I said earlier, it's recommended to use 3.6, but I'm using 2.7 because I have other programs that need or which are compatible with 2.7. The next step is to install the PAN-OS Python module. And to do that, let's check what I have installed right now. And the command for that is pip list. It's going to show all the modules that I have currently installed. And as we can see, I have Pan Python, but not Pan OS Python. So let's go and install Pan OS Python, which is required for Palo Alto firewalls. The command for that is pip install pan os-python. You can see the 2.7 deprecation message, but I'm going to ignore that right now. And you can see that it's successfully installed Pan OS Python version 1.12.1. And let's confirm that again by running the same pip list command. And now we can see that we have Pan OS Python 1.12.1 installed. So the next step is to use a small code which will help us configure the addresses, address group, and a policy that will be using those address group. So here we can see a sample code which is in Notepad++. It's a Python code, and we can see that I'm calling the required modules or classes in this case, for example, the firewall, policies, objects, and from within those classes, I'm using address object, address group, rulebase, and security rule. The first thing we do in PAN-OS Python module is to create a firewall object, which is basically your firewall IP address, your username, and the password. Once we do that, the next step is to create, in this example, since I'm only doing address object, and then I'm creating an address group, and then finally the rule. I'm only going to use 3 classes. So you can see I'm creating a address objects. Actually, in this case, I'm doing 2 address objects that will be part of the address group. And again, we simply call the address object class, and we give it the required arguments, for example, the name, the IP address, and description if you want to give it a description. But name and the type are required arguments. We add the address objects, and then we give it the web server, in this case, web server.create argument. So it will create that on the firewall. This is the same process for the second object. In this case, it's web server 2 with name, IP address, and description. The next part of this Python code is I'm creating an address object group, which will have these 2 web servers, which were created in the first step. I'm going to give it the name for this address group, description, and the static values, which in this case is a list value, and that will contain the names that were created in the earlier step, which is create address objects. And finally, I'm using the rulebase class. It's going to add it first in the rulebase, and then the security rule, which is also another class, is going to have a name. The sources is Apache server. Destination in this case is any, and action is also allow. So these are required arguments when you run the PanOS Python module. For security rule, or if you're creating any other object, there are some certain required arguments. In this case, the name, sources, and the actions are required arguments. And then we finally add the rule to rulebase, and then we finally create the rule. And I'm adding this to a main function. So if everything goes correctly, it should print a message that script completed successfully. So let's run this code in Python, and we will monitor the firewall for any changes. So now I'm in my Palo Alto firewall. We can confirm that I don't have any objects. As you can see, there are no addresses and also no address group, and there shouldn't be any policy. In our code, I'm creating 2 address objects, which are called Apache Web Server 1, Apache Web Server 2, and they will be part of the address group called Apache servers. And then we will have a rule which will utilize those objects, and that rule is called my test rule. And you can see I don't have a rule called my test rule. So I'm in my Python command window, and the file name that I'm going to be running is called pypanos.py. It's a Python file. So to run that, I'll use the command python pypanos, and I'll enter to run it. We can ignore this runtime warning because it's for the version 2.7. And you can see that the script completed successfully. So let's go back to the firewall and make sure we have those objects created. I'll refresh my screen. And we can see that it did create Apache Web Server 1, Apache Web Server 2 with the IP addresses. And they should be also part of the new address group, Apache servers. Apache server, you can see they are part of the group. And finally, the policy, which was named my test rule. And we can see that it's using the Apache web server group as the source. And we can verify those are the members. And it's going to destination any, and we're allowing the action. So this is basically a very simple code that we ran to configure Palo Alto Firewall. So let's say if we have to roll back or delete these objects and rule, we can do it manually in the GUI, or we'll have to go back to the code and we'll have to do it in reverse sequence. So first we will delete the rule, and this rule.create function will become rule.delete. And same thing, we'll delete the address group in second step. So this will become address underscore group.delete, and the same thing for address objects. And that's the reason I was saying earlier that Terraform, when it comes to applying and deleting, is more robust because it keeps states, and the destroy and apply are automatic. We don't have to do anything. But the reason I like Pan OS Python is it's much faster to apply on a heavy firewall like Palo Alto. So I hope you like this short video, and please do comment. Thank you and have a nice day.